Right. Carolyn, thank you very much, and you're the first principal that's agreed to have the talking head with me for the end of this year. So I'd just like to ask a similar sort of set of questions that I've asked the teachers in school today, but obviously I'd like you to look at it from more of a global overview with the school in mind. So what impact has e-learning had on Westmere School in this first year?
It's a big question. What impact? I think it's had a huge impact.
One would hope positive.
Positive and negative, I think.
Yeah.
The hugest impact probably is positive, definitely. Starting with the staff who were quite reluctant to pick up the e-learning mantle. They had a lot of fear, I think, around their own personal skill level. The greatest change I've noticed is people's willingness to give things a go and take risks. And so watching that change in staff has been a major impact, because the effect it's had is that they're actually modelling for their children the sorts of risks that children need to take if they want to improve their learning. I mean, the irony of it is that our children are much better at taking risks around e-learning because it's an area that they're basically native in. But for teachers, the willingness to give it a go, to work alongside their colleagues, to put themselves out there has been quite outstanding. When I said there's been some negative impact, probably for me it's around being really aware that for a lot of teachers, e-learning has equated a little bit with ICT equipment. And because of the huge need, we've been undergoing huge growth in our school, and we haven't been able to keep pace with keeping the technology up with the demand and the need. So it's been a really careful balance of encouraging teachers to give it a go when sometimes the equipment that they've got to do it with and the dreams that they have don't actually match up. And that's been a bit of a balance act. But to be honest with you, I don't think that's been a bad thing. I think sometimes to bring about new change in a school, you want to create a bit of a I think it's much better to have people knocking on your door wanting stuff than to put it out there for everyone
absolutely.
to have.
Make hunger, generate hunger.
Absolutely. So I think, if anything, that's been the biggest impact, is that we have generated hunger.
Cool.
And we've got a culture that's quietly starting to change. The other impact is that we took it to our board of trustees, invited you and our IT e-learning facilitator to come and present to them. And it's generated some really interesting discussion at board level about what they believe the role of e-learning is in schools, and they're very interested to take that discussion further to look at, as a school, what's our philosophy around creativity, because they realise that they had some concerns themselves around their interpretation of what e-learning is and the positive or negative impact on children's creative abilities, and so I think that's going to be really interesting going into 2011. And I'd see our next step would be to start to generate those sort of discussions with our wider parent body, which is a little bit more frightening, because I think we've got a whole gamut of people out there, from very conservative, worried, through to the, oh my God, why aren't you doing more with them? And you can create so much enthusiasm, but you can't again keep up resourcing it. So it's a fine balance, really. So the impact's been quite multifaceted in lots of ways.
So if you had to pick from, it's been, I mean, so picking a positive then. So what have you seen as a notable success or successes this year? I mean,
on the positives?
Well, with e-learning, yeah.
Okay. Well, probably one of the greatest successes I've seen is in well, there's two. The first one is amongst teachers. From people being considered to be the them, you're really good at e-learning, you know what you're doing, and us, I know nothing about it and I rely on you. There's a much better sense of a community of learners, that we're all e-learners together. I've seen some wonderful collaboration between teachers, where teachers have very happily shared their skills, where teachers who thought that they couldn't even begin to do this. I'm not going to set up a blog this year, I'm only going to do a wiki, I'm not even going to do a wiki, I'm just going to learn how to manage my emails. We imagined maybe, if we're lucky, having 6 interactive social sites. Now we've got, I think, 12 or 13 across the whole school.
So how much of an influence do you think that having a reliable and stable network underpinning that has been contributed to success?
Oh, absolutely. The year before we had huge problems with our network, and it actually put people off. If you don't have tools that you can rely on, it can totally undermine your whole classroom program.
Right.
And so for teachers to know that when they go to do something, they can do it, and it follows through, and they don't get thrown off every 2 minutes. They gain confidence in it, but why would you keep on persevering with something that is incredibly frustrating? So I think that's been underpinning, and I think that's probably the side that sometimes teachers haven't necessarily appreciated, was that our system prior to this year was actually quite poor. And we needed to put a lot of money into our infrastructure.
And nobody sees that, do they?
No, they don't, and it's a huge cost.
Yeah.
It's a huge cost, and it is an ongoing cost.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I suppose that for me is the biggest challenge in looking to the future. But I think the thing that I love about having decided that we've set up a long-term strategy for e-learning. It's not just something we've done, we've done e-learning this year.
Let's move on, yeah.
It's something that we're embedding, as this is the way we do things in the school, is that we can actually have a long-term plan to quietly tick off and make sure that the infrastructure is secure in the school, because it's like, it's like the hardware in the classroom. You can't ask teachers to do a good job if they don't have the basic tools of the trade.
Yeah.
And for e-learning now, the electronic equipment, the backbone of the school, a good fibre optic network, good fast broadband connection into the school, which we don't have yet. But those things,
it's coming.
Those things are actually imperative, and schools have to plan for them.
So would you say then that the financing and the implementation of that would be the major challenge then to you as a principal?
Definitely, and especially for us, because the school's growing so rapidly, we've been in that terrible position where we haven't been able to maintain we had a development plan of actually increasing our ICT capacity, but because of the fact we just grew so quickly, 7 classrooms in 1 year, we haven't been able to keep up with our just renewal plan, let alone put new things into classrooms. And I feel like, for a while there, and to a certain degree, we're still slightly going backwards. I think next year, because the board have put quite a big input of injection of cash into our capital expenditure program, that we will get up to even. But I think it's going to be a while before we actually feel like we've got the supply that we'd like to have. Well, that's quite worrying, really, because I can see more and more we're not going to have any options, because it's just going to be what children will want to have in their classrooms. It's just the way they have a pen or a paintbrush today. So I think that is going to be an ongoing challenge.
So finally then, has overall has the school seen an impact upon student learning within the classroom integration, the classrooms that are integrating e-learning this year?
That's a really interesting question, because it's something that I'd like to explore a lot more next year. I think the most obvious way that we've seen it is in student engagement and motivation. Walking into Nell's class, watching her 6-year-olds present to their parents and their grandparents.
That was phenomenal that day.
It was just so inspiring, and it actually, for me as a principal, made it all worthwhile, because to see the children so engaged, so totally in control of their own learning, and see parents blown away by the fact that they could learn from their children was really inspiring. And so that's very hard, it's intangibles to measure. But I'd quite like to set that as a goal next year, to say, what are the sorts of things that we can measure, and let's try to do that. I know that we've done a little bit where teachers have set their own inquiry goals themselves, looking at their own personal development and their own use of e-learning in the classroom, and some of them have tried to say, well, how can I measure the impact on our children? But I think it's something we want to refine a bit more. It'd be interesting to see what other schools are doing in that area.